咁首先咧，我會介紹一下幾位喺台上面嘅講者嘅。咁首
The
先
speakers on the
咁就係我哋警務處助理處長行動麥展豪先生。咁而喺麥 Sir 嘅右手邊咧，就係消防處副消防總長總部陳慶勇先生。
Mr. Derek Chan, Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Headquarters of Fire Services Department. Then we have Mr. Che Chen Chung, Chief Superintendent of Police, Public Relations Branch. Next to his right is Mr. Kwang Wing Chang, Senior Superintendent, Media Liaison and Communication of the Police Public Relations Branch. And then to the far left, we have Mr. Lee Kwai Wah, Senior Superintendent of Organized Crime and Triad Bureau. The speakers will speak first, and then there will be questions and answers session. If you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand. Our colleagues will pass you a microphone. Please limit your questions to no more than 3, and then please hand over the microphone to our colleague after you've asked your questions. Thank you. Now I'll hand over to Mr. Mack. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the past weekend, Hong Kong has suffered once again. On the 31st of August, last Saturday, that was, starting from the afternoon, protesters started to block our major thoroughfares, bringing traffic to a standstill. Some radical protesters set fires extensively at many locations across the territory. They also destroyed public and livelihood facilities. At various places across the territory in Hong Kong, Kowloon, and the New Territories, they held at least 100 petrol bombs. You could look at this map here. Please hold the map, please. On the Hong Kong island alone, at the central government offices, the police headquarters, Wan Chai and Causeway Bay, at least 70 petrol bombs were hurled. On the Kowloon side, at Tsim Sha Tsui, Sham Shui Po, and even in Tin Shui Wai, there were petrol bomb attacks. Radical protesters now use petrol bombs that could burn longer and more violently, therefore inflicting more harm. If someone is hit by a petrol bomb, unfortunately, the consequences would be inconceivable. We can see that the radical protesters have completely lost control. They have no regard to the life and safety of the public. I mentioned just now at Hennessy Road, Wan Chai, someone set fires. Such fires straddled many lanes on Hennessy Road. Radical protesters kept throwing objects into the fires to fuel the fire. At least 2 explosions could be heard on the scene. That is a serious danger to the life and safety of residents and citizens nearby. At the evening, in our Prince Edward Station operation, we seized petrol bombs like the one here. Then on Sunday, protesters did not stop their violent acts. They disrupted traffic and order in the vicinity of the airport extensively. They also vandalized many MTR stations. Starting from noon, a large number of protesters gathered outside the airport terminals. They spread out to the roads in the vicinity of the airport. They used metal barriers, luggage trolleys, and garbage bins to set up road barriers and block roads illegally. They also broke the glass case of fire service installations. Such behavior could have violated the court injunction issued earlier, and that could be contempt of court. Some protesters also hurled bricks, metal poles, and other miscellaneous items onto the tracks of the Airport Express line. Some even stormed into the reserve area of the train of the Airport Express line. So train services had to be suspended at one point. Large number of visitors and residents had to cart along their luggage and helping the old and young to walk to the airport. In Tung Chung, some radical protesters set fire twice and lit up the national flag. In the middle of the road, they burned water-filled barriers, traffic cones, and miscellaneous items. The tongues of fire reached 3 meters at one point. Apart from disrupting traffic and order near the airport, masked radical protesters also stormed into many MTR stations. They vandalized the stations and attacked citizens in the station. And some protesters suspected that citizens took their picture, so they attacked the citizens. They threw a man onto the street and lynched him. Now, what the radical protesters are doing, like an epidemic, they have no regard to the law and they have lost their sense of reason. We've seen that radical protesters storming into various MTR stations. They vandalized station facilities. They used iron hammers to break the glass window of the control room. They vandalized and spray paint on ticket vending machines, turnstiles, CCTV. They broke platform doors and even stormed into the control room and vandalized it.
Some rioters also removed fire extinguishers, fire hose, and they also turned on the fire hose wheel, leading to flooding. And a number of rioters used umbrellas to block the views of other people at the scene, including cameras of reporters. In 2 days, among the 90-odd MTR stations, almost one-third were damaged to different extents, and some train service was severely impeded. The acts of rioters bore no connection to the so-called justice they are trying to seek, and they were pure acts of destruction of social order. Any language used to mask such violence would only condone their malicious acts. On television, we could see that rioters broke into an area of the track along the Airport Express line, and some people hurled stones into the track. And you could imagine that if a train was passing by at that time, there could be a serious accident leading to mass casualties, and this would seriously threaten passenger and railway safety. The so-called justice they are talking about amounts to extreme selfishness, and they had no regard to the lives of other people. Rioters used valiance to rationalize their damaging acts, and the biggest victim is the city of Hong Kong. Before I hand over to Mr. Chair to explain the arrests made by the police this past weekend, I would like to play you a short video which would summarize the violent acts by some people over this weekend. Over the past weekend, between Friday and Sunday, a total of 159 people were arrested, including 132 males and 27 females aged between 13 and 58. The alleged offenses include taking part in an unlawful assembly, possession of an offensive weapon, assault on police officer, and obstructing the discharge of duty by a police officer. Starting from this morning, protesters across Hong Kong have conducted disruptive and unlawful acts. With regards to specific incidents at Lei Yue Mun Plaza, Lok Fu MTR Station, Liking MTR Station, the police arrested 8 males and females for possession of offensive weapon and breach of court injunction. As of today, a total of 1,117 people were arrested. In terms of court cases, 16 persons were alleged of committing riot along Hennessy Road and Great George Street, and they made a court appearance at the West Kowloon Magistrates Court this afternoon. Meanwhile, a 13-year-old boy and a 33-year-old man were alleged to have committed possession of offensive weapon at Prince Edward MTR Station on the 31st of August, and they made court appearances at the Juvenile Court and Kowloon City Magistrates Court, respectively, this afternoon. And in our operation over the weekend, 2 police officers were injured during an operation. At night on the 31st of August, a superintendent, when subduing an arrestee, he was battered by protesters with metal poles, and he was hit in the face and suffered a bruise to his nose. He was discharged upon treatment. Another station surgeon was injured with a slingshot in the thigh or the calf, and it was swollen, and the officer was discharged upon treatment. And since last Friday, no ammunition was used by the police, and on the 31st of August, the police deployed 241 CS grenade and CS rounds, 92 rubber baton rounds, 1 round of super sock, and 10 rounds of 40-millimeter launcher. And at about 9 p.m., 2 officers were surrounded by many violent rioters, and the rioters attempted to snatch their guns. They were under threat, and as such fired 2 warning shots into the sky to protect the safety of themselves and others. And on the 1st of September, no ammunition was used by the police. I'd like to make 2 clarifications. First of all, a photo was circulated online alleging that in the afternoon of the 30th of August, on a footbridge in Admiralty, a protester suspected to be equipped with an air pistol was hurling a petrol bomb, and that person was a police undercover. We point out that this is a completely untrue accusation. First of all, the gun showed in the photo was not equipment used by the police, and second, the person shown in the photo was not a police officer, and number 3, police officers would never use petrol bombs in our operation, and our officers would act in accordance with the law. We strongly condemn such accusation, which put a bad name on the police force. In the past 2 months, we saw that the violence used by rioters constantly escalated. They hurled bricks, metal poles, and fired slingshots at the police, and they hurled many petrol bombs, and some of our officers were burned as a result. Such despicable acts with no bottom line only serve to injure other people, and there was no regard to the lives of other people. Like we said, some rioters were suspected of carrying air pistols during protests, and this could constitute a crime, and such acts are extremely dangerous. In such a chaotic protest scene, if anyone points a suspected air pistol at the police, our officers could not immediately verify the authenticity of the pistol or whether there were live rounds inside. I must point out that if anyone points firearms at anyone, the police would deploy proportionate force at the scene to hold such act, and the consequences could be a lot more serious than imagined.
The second clarification, someone said on the social media that at the evening on the 31st of August, the police attacked citizens at the Prince Edward Station and someone was killed. That's again totally inaccurate accusation. The MTR station was closed as to cover up the police's actions. I must point out again, this is a totally false and erroneous accusation. The hospital authority has also clarified that no such thing happened. No one died as a result of the Prince Edward Station operation. Now, I must point out that there are many rumors circulating in the social media targeting the police. These are false news and that's unfounded accusation, and these are distorted facts. There are so many erroneous accusations against the police during this period. We strongly condemn it and we are indignified by it. Now, many these rumors are just to give the wrong impressions to the public. They are resorting all means to destroy the relations between the police force and the public. We have to consider why they're doing it. So whenever you receive any information, please pause for a moment, think, and clarify whether it's true or not. Now I hand over to the police Deputy Chief Fire Officer. Good afternoon. Now on the I would like to report what the Fire Services Department observed over the weekend. On Saturday, the Fire Services Department received 8 reports of fire. 2 were at the central government offices and police headquarters involving the hurling of petrol bombs. And another case, someone used inflammable liquids to burn miscellaneous items on Hennessy Road. At the time, there were road barricades put up by protesters. Our officers had to walk 200 meters to the scene of the fire with our gear because the road was blocked, and that substantially impeded our rescue our operations. And then on Hennessy Road, there were residential buildings as well as hotels. The fire actually spread near one of the hotels. Unfortunately, the sprinkler system of the hotel worked, and it helped to stop the fire from spreading. On Sunday, there were 6 reports of fire involving the protest. One was outside Tung Chung Station. Miscellaneous items were burned. Again, it was a fierce fire. And there was another case in Tin Shui when someone hurled petrol bombs. It actually it actually burned a private vehicle inside the Tin Shui Wai ambulance station. And then there were also protesters walking from the airport to Tung Chung, and then they threw miscellaneous items onto the tracks of the airport express line that included bricks, metal poles, and so on. Now, this would just seriously endanger passengers using the train service. This is most irresponsible. If the train should derail, there would be dire consequences. And also inside the Tung Chung MTR station, there were people vandalizing fire service installations in the station or misusing such installations. They broke the glass cabinet of fire service installation. They also left a fire hydrant open, and water gushed out to flood the MTR station. And also some used the fire hose for purpose other than putting out a fire. So if there should be a fire in a station, then these facilities could not be put to proper use, and that would endanger the lives of those in the station. The consequences could again be dire. Now, for such acts that endanger the public, the Fire Services Department strongly condemns them. we must also appeal to the public that protesters must exercise restraint. They must have regard to the safety of everybody. They must stop such acts. And also, we must warn the public to remain vigilant and stay away from places that may be dangerous. Please don't try to stay on as onlookers. And we must also say this to reporters. Yes, we know you have a duty to cover news, but where you stand actually could be dangerous. So the Fire Service Department would like to remind reporters to pay attention to your own safety as you work. On the 31st of August, at the Prince Edward MTR station, there were a large number of those injured. At 10:57 p.m., the Fire Service Department received a series of reports of fire. We arrived at the Prince Edward Station at 11:01 p.m. We confirmed there was no fire, but then we saw a number of persons injured there. So our officers gave treatment to those injured. At around the same time, at 11:05 p.m., someone reported that many people were injured at the Prince Edward Station, so we sent our ambulances to deal with the cases. The first ambulance arrived at 11:17 p.m. At that time, the gate of the MTR station was lowered already. So after coordination with the police, the MTR staff, and our commanders, at around 11:30 p.m., we entered the MTR station to do an assessment on those injured. And subsequently, there were more medics arriving at 0:30 a.m. to give treatment to the 7 injured persons in the station. The police assessed that the area surrounding the Prince Edward MTR station was not safe. So, having taken safety into consideration, it was thought inappropriate for those our medics and the injured to leave via the station exit. That's why 2 special train services were arranged to send the injured persons along with the relevant officers to the Characters Hospital and the Princess Margaret Hospital for treatment. Thank you. Thank you. Perhaps I could sum up here. As I said from the beginning, Hong Kong has suffered an unprecedented social catastrophe. People hijacked the name of justice. Radical protesters blocked roads, set fires, vandalized public facilities, hurled petrol bombs, they worked in mobs. And they also resorted to vigilantism. So such violent acts are certainly not accepted by any civilized society. They're losing control in the violent act, and they're destroying the law and order in Hong Kong, and they will make Hong Kong people suffer. We are really worried that such violence will spread to young people and even younger children. As I mentioned, there was a 13-year-old boy with petrol bombs on him when he was arrested. And then at the MTR station, we also seized such petrol bombs. Fortunately, these cases did not lead to any serious casualties or fatalities. But we must point out arson is a serious offense. A maximum penalty is life imprisonment. So please think about it. If you, yourself, or your children are in an MTR station, and then some radical protesters lit a petrol bomb, causing serious casualties and fatalities. It could be in an MTR station, it could be an MTR train. Would you be worried if that's the case? Or think about it. Say your friends or your children have been persuaded to set fires or to hurl petrol bombs, hurting others or even themselves. Would you want that to happen? Or maybe your children use or possess petrol bombs and are arrested, would you still agree to or condone their behavior? And we must also point out that after each major incident on the internet or in some media, there would always be circulation of unconfirmed news, such as what we've mentioned, that is a malicious accusation or false accusations. The police strongly condemn such irresponsible behavior. Such false news probably is meant to fool the public and to maliciously attack the police in their law enforcement actions. Or they just try to find excuses for the unlawful behaviors of the radical protesters.
The police have always respected freedom of press and of speech, and these fake news are what is eroding freedom of the press. And such news would encourage more people to commit unlawful acts. As such, we hope the public and media to be more prudent when digesting such information. No demand should be rationalized or glorified in a violent manner. We urge the public to say no to violence, because rationalizing or condoning such serious acts of violence would be equal to condoning violence or encouraging violence. The violent acts of the rioters with no bottom line would only sacrifice the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong, and it is an act of hijack to everyone, and everyone would sacrifice. We would continue to work with other enforcement agencies to restore order in Hong Kong. 咁咧，我就會用英文簡單去總結一下嘅，正如我所講啦。希望先咧俾大家睇一睇呢一個即係畫面嘅。咁咧呢個週末咧香港即係好多嘅示威者咧就大肆破壞啦。咁喺星期六咧喺好多嘅港島地方咧，咁咧示威者咧喺道路度係用一啲路障嚟癱瘓交通啦。咁呢一啲暴徒咧係投擲咗最少近100枚嘅汽油彈嘅，咁係喺全港多個地區度投擲。咁咧呢個咧係危害到市民嘅安全啦，亦都係破壞咗附近嘅店鋪嘅。唔同嘅政府大樓，包括係政府總部、立法會同埋警察總部咧，亦都係受到汽油彈嘅投擲嘅。咁有一啲人咧，甚至喺行人天橋度咧，即係投擲向呢一個警察嘅總部。咁同過去幾週相比咧，投擲汽油彈咧係更加危險嘅。咁有一啲極端嘅暴徒咧，甚至係焚燒一啲路障，同埋將唔同嘅物件咧係掟入去嘅。咁喺現場咧，至少2次傳出爆炸聲。咁呢一啲魯莽嘅行為咧，係嚴重咁危害咗公眾安全。咁喺星期日，呢啲激進嘅行為咧，仍然係冇停止嘅。咁有大批嘅示威者喺機場嘅客運大樓集結，然後咧就係設置路障。佢哋更加咧係有燃燒到國旗嘅。咁有啲人咧就將一啲物件，包括係石頭啦，或者係鐵枝掟入機場快線嘅路軌範圍。由於機場咧係禁制令係有效嘅，咁呢一啲示威者咧係可能係犯上藐視法庭罪。
Such rampant acts spread to other key transport infrastructure, mainly the MTR. Day and night, rioters vandalized around 1/3 of all MTR stations in Hong Kong. They smashed CCTVs, ticket machines, turnstiles, and shattered glass panes of customer service centers. Some even took justice in their own hands and assaulted innocent passengers. Such violent acts pose a grave danger to the ordinary citizens as well as our officers on site. Now I will move on to the arrest figures. Between Friday and Sunday, we arrest 159 people in total, aged between 13 and 58, consisting of 132 males and 27 males. 132 males and 27 females. They were arrested for offenses like unlawful assembly and possession of offensive weapon and assaulting police officers, etc. This morning, we mount operations targeting acts of violence and breaches of the peace. We arrest 8 people for possession of offensive weapon and breach of injunction outside different MTR stations. Now I'll move on to rebut some false online rumors. Firstly, there are doubts about the identity of a certain protester who had a pistol-like object tied to his or her belt throwing a petrol bomb in Causeway Bay. We must clarify that this protester was not a police officer, and the pistol-like object was believed to be an imitation pistol. Secondly, on Saturday, we came across the worrying scene that certain protesters were holding imitation firearms and BB bullets. I must emphasize using imitation fire weapons in such chaotic environment is highly dangerous. It's difficult, if not impossible, for officers to tell whether they are genuine firearms. If anyone points firearm at any person, police might be required to resort to appropriate force to combat the violence. Thirdly, I must emphasize that there is no death resulting from the MTR violent incidents, as confirmed by the hospital authority. Any online rumor that says otherwise is not only false, but also malicious. In conclusion, rioters have demonstrated escalating violence and resort to weapons more and more offensive, and in certain cases, deadly. It also varies to see such offense weapons fall into the hands of underage people as young as 13 years old. All this pushes Hong Kong to the brink of great danger. I must emphasize the offense of arson is a serious offense. The maximum penalty is life imprisonment. We appeal to all members of the public to make a clean break with such violent and criminal elements. We also hope citizens will think twice before forwarding unverified information, as spreading of fake news will breed hatred. It is high time to restore public order for Hong Kong.
好，我哋時間，港台。
Question and answer session, please. RTHK. I'm from RTHK. I have a few questions for Mr. Mack. You said on the 31st of August was a catastrophe for Hong Kong. I'm sure many citizens would agree. From the videos you played, we saw that, well, you only played part of the footage. At Prince Edward Station, there were raptors, and they beat up MTR passengers violently. I'm sure you wouldn't deny such scenes because some live footage was available, so you would not say that they are rumors. So how can you tell the public that it is safe to take the MTR if there is police presence? On that night, you beat up citizens of the people injured. How many were actually the rioters or protesters that you claim? If the answer was none, would the police force apologize to citizens who were present that night? According to what Madam Yu said, you could not distinguish who was who in the flash of the moment. If a mistake or an error was made, would you apologize to the people there or the watching audience who was frightened? And second question, at Causeway Bay, our crew and other media saw that in the arrest operation, an undercover officer was carrying something that looked like a gun, and live rounds were fired at the Victoria Park. So why would you allow undercover cops to carry a gun? This is very dangerous. And from the footage, we saw that people who threw petrol bombs looked very similar to your undercover officers telling by his or her wrists. So how would the police back up such claim? And Mr. Mack said the plague of violence is spreading, and another plague that is spreading is the trend of people being called cockroaches. Many reporters were called cockroaches by frontline police officers, and citizens were also labeled cockroaches by frontline officers. And earlier, Mr. Kong said such acts were inappropriate, and apparently there was no improvement among frontline officers. Does it mean that someone such as the assistant commissioner or above must speak up at the police before the frontline officers would stop calling citizens and reporters cockroaches? And on that night, the Raptors violently beat up the citizens because the practice of calling citizens cockroaches have been spreading. Would you ask the Junior Police Officers Association to withdraw what they said so that the ordinary citizens will stop being beaten up?
Thank you for your three questions. I'm going to invite Mr. Chair and Mr. Kong to supplement. No, let me first give some brief answers as an opener first. Now, I thank you for the question, but I can't agree with what you said. Now, you said that in the MTR station we beat up citizens. We totally do not agree. You mean it never happened? Can you let me finish, please? Just now you showed the TVB clip, and that was broadcast live. So are you denying that you beat up citizens? Are you denying that you have beaten up citizens? Let me say this again. I cannot agree to your question that the police beat up citizens on that day in our operation. On the day, the police received information and they entered the MTR station. We took action to stop some violent incidents. Mr. Jay will give you more details in a moment. Now, when our colleagues went in the station, we were attacked. And there were ordinary citizens who managed to leave the MTR station without incident. As we showed you earlier, in the MTR station, we found on those arrested petrol bombs. And also within the vicinity of the MTR station, inside the station that is, we found petrol bombs that no one claimed to be theirs. So there was possession of prohibited articles that could lead to serious crime. At the time, the police was carrying out law enforcement action. Mr. Chair would give you more information later on. So you don't need to apologize even if citizens have been injured. But can you please let Mr. Mack answer the question? In the past 2 weeks, we've managed to have good order at the press conference. Each reporter can ask 3 questions, so please let them finish with their answers first. Okay, thank you. Thank you for observing the rule here. Now, second question about decoy police officers. Can you not give answers to the first question? I said I cannot agree to what you said. You said Mr. Jay would also give supplement. No, the other reporters, please let Mr. Mack finish the answer first. Now, you are causing confusion here. Please let Mr. Mack finish. It's just a straightforward demand. Finish your answer to the first question first. If that's the way, you could never answer the question. Okay, I'll let Mr. Jay supplement then. Okay, on the first question, Mr. Mack just said we do not agree to what this reporter said, that is we violently beat up citizens. We must make this very clear. On that day, you can't just rely on the video clip that was shown or on other individual video clips to determine what actually happened on the day. Now we have to look at what happened before and after the operation on that night. As you know, at first it was in Mong Kok. There were radical protesters vandalizing facilities in Mong Kok, and then these radical protesters boarded an MTR train towards Prince Edward, and then there was fighting between the protesters and citizens. And at the time they used fire extinguishers. Please talk about the raptors beating up people. Let's not talk about what happened before. No, I was just saying, if we want to know what happened, we need to know the whole case. So the police, in response to the demand of the public and the MTRs, went into the station to deal with such violent acts. So when the police arrived at the MTR station, our targets were people who have broken the law. Please let the officer finish. Can I finish with my answer, please? Well, please listen when I'm giving an answer first, okay, please? Okay, so we went into the station targeting people who've broken the law. And you could see from different video clips that there were many citizens who were free to leave the MTR station. They were not stopped by the police, and they were not questioned by the police. Now, we had lawful suspicion. That's why we entered the station to deal with people we wanted to deal with. As you could see clearly, it's not that in the whole station or in every train car that we went in to deal with certain people. Why did we pick certain cars? There were several reasons. One, when we arrived at the station, inside the public, some members of the public would tell us where there were problems, and then our officers would observe and then form their own judgment. And they would see which of those people might have been involved in those cases. And from the video clips, you could tell clearly that in that particular train car, there were many people who put up their umbrella or to form a barricade, or they were confrontational inside the car when we were outside by the door. And then when some officers went into the train cars to deal with certain cases, and you could see from the video clips that there were some of those people who attacked police officers using umbrellas or hard objects. So they assaulted our colleagues. And in that confrontation, the police used appropriate force to stop their acts. And after stopping these acts, the police immediately stopped using force. Now, you mentioned that we arrested over 60 people. There were actually 63 people arrested, 54 males and 9 females, aged between 13 and 50-something. Now, for these people arrested, we found on them, or at the location where they were arrested, a large number of offensive weapons. So you've said that already. Maybe I didn't make myself clear. I'm saying that for those whose head were mashed, how many of them were actually protesters? Can you please be focused? How can you be sure that all those who were beaten up by police were not citizens? Please let him finish answering the questions. Did you get my question? Did you not promise me to let me finish with my answer first? But you are repeating yourself. Now, I think my answer is to tell the public what happened. It's not specifically the point. We all know what this report is asking about. Please follow the usual rule. It's not yet your turn to ask questions. Please don't ask questions. Otherwise, no one will be able to ask questions, and we're wasting time here. It's not your turn. Please don't speak. Please respect me. Can you answer me? For those who were beaten up, how many were actually the arrested protesters? Can you tell the people of Hong Kong? Now, you already mentioned you arrested 63 people. There's no need to repeat that point. I will continue with my answer. Now, as I said, on persons arrested, and we found petrol bombs. There were also a large number of petrol bombs left behind. There were laser pointers, slingshots, and steel pellets. Now, you said that we're dealing with ordinary citizens and passengers. We certainly do not agree. We're saying that among those arrested, especially the several whose heads were smashed, were they the persons arrested? That's really my question.
Based on the Fire Services Department, 7 persons were injured. Were they rioters? We are still following up on injured persons who were admitted to hospital. As for their roles in the incident, this is still under investigation, including the 63 people we arrested. As for the connection between those 63 people and the 7 injured persons, I cannot offer an answer right now. I would address the second question on the alleged undercover officer with a gun. It's clear that last Saturday, undercover operation was conducted by the police, but I stress that the main purpose of such operation was to target or deal with people who use extreme violence. As for the gear carried by our undercover officers, it is an operational detail, so I cannot divulge the information. But I could say that we would consider the nature of the operation and carry out appropriate risk assessment. And like we already explained, undercover operations are a common tactic for arrest and investigation. It would depend on the nature of the cases involved. For example, for narcotics crime, we would dress up as someone related to the narcotics, and in a gambling investigation, we would dress up as a gambler, etc. We are looking at extremely violent protesters, and as such, we must afford enough protection for our officers before they carry out the operation. You are yet to answer the second question. How would you distinguish? Can you stop interrupting, please? You are blatantly interrupting. Well, this is still our time. This is still my time. Would Mr. Lee explain the operational details, or Mr. Mack, in the spur of the moment, how could you be sure that those people were not your people? You said your undercover officers would dress up depending on the actual circumstances or situation, and would it justify hurling petrol bombs? Well, I have been following your answers, but I'd like to know what happened that day. Would Mr. Mack take this question? I reiterate that in the police's undercover operations, illegal acts would never be conducted, let alone the use of flare bombs. The enforcement actions taken by the police serve to maintain public safety and order. I categorically reject such accusations. Do you have anything to add for the second question? Mr. Lee? I would ask Mr. Lee to supplement. Well, I'd like to add something on question one. Even though I'm not in charge of the relevant investigation unit, I have maintained communication with the relevant units. You said for people attacked on the MTR train at Prince Edward Station, well, I wasn't at the scene and I only knew about it from the news. There was a couple and other people, and some people were arrested at Yau-Ma-Tei Station. They were alleged to have engaged in illegal activities at Prince Edward Station, so we should not jump to conclusions. Can you provide relevant figures? How many were hit in or injured in the head? I couldn't see whether people were injured, but I can say that no arrests were made at the site. The arrests were only made at Yau-Ma-Tei Station. So I hope you would not jump to conclusions so soon, saying that those were innocent civilians. They might be involved. So please give us some time so we might be able to find evidence in some CCTV footage. What about the second question? And I want to make it clear that our unit was not responsible for that case, but we can try to provide more details. Like Mr. Mack said, it was an undercover arrest operation. The people arrested were people who hurled petrol bombs and people who attacked police officers and buildings. After we identified the people involved, we sent in our officers. And some of our officers were alleged to be police officers. Our officers were approached and asked whether they were from the police. We made it clear that we were police officers. Normally, the people would leave, but these people tried to snatch the guns of our colleagues, and our colleagues had no choice but to fire a shot as warning. It was a warning shot for the opposite party to leave, and we proceeded to arrest, and all of a sudden a group of people assaulted us. Some people hurled petrol bombs at us. Fortunately, the bomb didn't go off, and as such, we fired a second warning shot. And we had to wait for the support from other uniformed officers to arrive before the undercover operation came to a close. As for the injuries suffered, they all suffered minor injuries. Of the 8 people, 7 they received treatment, and 1 other was injured when he was being subdued. The police officers' injuries were more serious. You said arrests were made on the train at Yau-Ma-Tei Station. Is it that you didn't know whether there were injured people? Is this a correct interpretation? The people you arrested were all not injured. Well, that's not the way to put it. For those in the train, or people who were being subdued by the police, those people were arrested at Yau-Ma-Tei. I cannot say whether that represented all of them. Does this include the man in blue with a hammer? Among the arrestees, was the man in blue holding a hammer part of the group? Well, we must limit some questions to 3 per outlet. You have been speaking for more than half an hour. Well, for the labeling of cockroaches, Mr. Kong constantly failed to address our questions.
Well, a brief response from me. If anyone hears any derogatory term used on himself or herself, of course, it's not desirable. Now, we are a professional, disciplined force. Of course, we would encourage our colleagues to be as professional as possible in dealing with circumstances. But may I take this opportunity to appeal to your understanding. Now, if anyone uses derogatory terms on each other, that's actually not the kind of attitude we should have in a civilized society. Would you ask people to retract this cockroach, Lau Chi-wai? Would you ask him to retract his comments about cockroaches? Do you have the power to do so? Who can answer that question? Now, on your third question, let me respond. I have actually repeated it many times. Will you ask Lam Chi-wai to retract his comment, yes or no? Please let him answer the question. Okay, I will respond to your third question. I've repeated this many times. Now, for any impolite comments, it's never ideal. Now we've been in the past 2 months or so of operation, of course, there's much tension in society and everyone is under pressure in the process. I understand sometimes our colleagues may say something that's not polite, but I must point out too that in our operations over the past 2 months, protesters often use provocative words against my colleagues. I would like to point out here that when there are arguments or shouting match at each other, of course, it's not desirable. And such shouting match will not help the situation at hand, and it won't help actually the demands made by the protesters either. I've always said it's not nice to be shouting at each other. We always respect peaceful and orderly protesters in making their demands, and communication is all about mutual respect. Please, this RTHK reporter, please give our officer time to answer a question. If you take up 35 minutes all by yourself, and it's not fair to other reporters. Well, let me repeat. I'm just answering your third question. For impolite comments, within the police force, it's not just me who think it's not desirable. Mr. Max also mentioned that. Even among the management, we think this is not desirable. So I hope in mutual communication there will be mutual respect, and everyone will remain polite for effective communication. Otherwise the shouting match will only escalate tension. It's not going to help the whole matter. This one in black. Now, for this, you said that the protest on the 31st of August is illegal. This is contempt of court, right? So for such who've committed contempt of court, but you've only arrested 159 persons from Friday to Monday, maybe more. So what if more will be arrested? How do you propose to deal with that? That's the first question. Second question. Now, we just came from the Edinburgh place. We found many secondary school students assembling there. We know this is a lawful assembly, but then there were many people around clad in black there, and we could see on the social media that they plan to hurt children of police officers. Now, for such news circulating, what are you going to do to prevent the crime from, the cases from actually happening? Thank you for your two questions. On the first question, if I understand it correctly, you're saying that how we are going to deal with public events. Now, the position of the police always been that for peaceful and law-abiding public events, the police would try to facilitate and assist as far as possible. But for unlawful, and in particular violent assemblies, the police would always do an appropriate risk assessment each time. And we would take suitable law enforcement actions as far as practicable. Now, online there are comments intimidating or threatening the children of police officers. The police will take such cases very seriously, and we will follow up in accordance with the law, definitely. Thank you.
Police mentioned officers seized batches of petrol bombs in Prince Edward MTR station on Saturday night. How many of them are we talking about, and do you have any intelligence showing them that protesters planned to use this bomb to attack the station that night or to attack the railway system in the near future? And secondly, also questions about the same night. And footage also showed that the old man who clashed with the protesters with the hammer took place in Kwun Tong line, whereas elite officers and a train along Chin Wan line. So could you clarify further what prompted the officers to enter the train, because the crime apparently took place on a different trains? And the third question is about Kwok Lam. I understand that you held a briefing yesterday, but after an overnight investigation, could you tell us more about the links of these 8 people to a protest in recent weeks, and whether these skiers have been used in recent protests, and what are the roles of these arrested 8 persons, as a few of them claim that they were only operating a business?
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. And I will invite Mr. Jie to answer the first 2 questions, and Mr. Lee will follow up the third one.
For the first question about the seizure of the petrol bombs, basically we have arrested 13 years old kids who was in possession of 2 petrol bombs, and 3 other petrol bombs were left behind the scene. The case was now investigated by the Regional Crime Unit of the Kowloon West Region, and he was charged on the offense of possession of offensive weapons this morning and arranged to appear for the Kowloon City Magistrate this afternoon. As the case is now sub judice, we cannot make further comments on that specific case. While for the entry into MTR station, I think police are duty bound to restore public order and public peace, regardless of the location of the crime happened. If anyone breaks the law, basically police have the responsibility to respond to the scene and enforce the law. When the criminal acts taking place inside MTR stations, the police are entitled to enter to carry out investigation and to arrest the offenders. I think certain offenders sometimes regards MTR stations or shopping malls as a refuge where they can evade the criminal liability after breaking the laws. It is a wrong thinking. Yesterday, basically, we found that inside the Mong Kok and Prince Edward MTR station, we found that 2 groups of people threw objects and water bottles at each other inside the compartment of the MTR train. And at one point, even one man in blue shirt waved a hammer in the air. And some protester, after attacking others, get changed on the platform before the police arrive. And police have zero tolerance for all such violence acts. And when entering MTR station to enforce the law. Basically, we do not have to obtain any consent in advance. Thank you.
Mr. Liu.
Yes. The case referred by you is happened on the last Saturdays. This is based on a report from the members of the public, and by saying that some people is disseminating offensive weapons on the street. The name is claim themselves is two store 五金鋪, but definitely it's not an 五金鋪 because what the things disseminate to the protesters is some corrosive liquids, some paint, axe, baseball bat, and some fake press bras. I think all you know that definitely is not for the for the tools for making any equipments, but when you think, I think some of the things is quite commonly used previously in some violence protesters. Say for example the corrosive liquids, the paint, and the baseball bat. So I think that now we arrest 8 of them for the possession of the offensive weapon, and now we will proceed the case and see whether other suitable offense will be used to prosecuting them. Thank you.
今日嘅最後3位 Cable TV。
Last 3 questions, please. Cable TV. I'm from Cable TV. At Prince Edward Station at platform number 3, there were reports of a fight, but the police enforced law at platform number 4. Why was that? And at Prince Edward Station, when the FSD spends more than 2 hours in sending the injured people to the hospitals. So how much did it take for the medics to arrive at the platform area? Did the police assess whether or not that some people could be injured? Was the delay in rescue a tactical error? And outside TSD station, a girl had her eye injured. What is the progress of investigation? The medical report was obtained. Have you ascertained the reason of the injury? Thank you very much for the question. I will invite Mr. Chair to answer the first question, and then Mr. Mac the second question, and then Mr. Lee the third question. At that time, the rioters on the train, most of them conducted vandalism at Mong Kok Station, and then they boarded a train on Kwun Tong line. And by the time the train arrived at Prince Edward, they should be at platform number 3. Based on internet footage, we saw that they were in an altercation with some passengers on the train, and some people clad in white were beaten up by the train. By the time the train arrived at platform number 3, some protesters and rioters tried to hold the doors of the train. They were yelling at each other. They hurled water bottles and other objects at each other. And like we said, a man dressed in blue swung a hammer, and some rioters used fire extinguishers to splash water inside the train. A lady tried to capture video on her phone, and her handset, someone tried to grab her phone, and a 999 call was received, and we went to the platform of Prince Edward Station to deal with the report. We saw that a lot of protesters clad in black opened their umbrellas and got changed at the platform. So what was they trying to achieve by changing their clothes? I do not wish to speculate, but I would believe that they want to flee. And the platforms numbers 3 and 4 are located on the same floor, as you know. and the police considered a number of factors. Officers arrived at the platforms and they were told by citizens what was happening, and the police would also make observations themselves to see whether there were any malicious acts, including people leaving or confrontational people. There were 2 trains at that time, so why would our officers deal with specific cars? For the train at platform number 4, at certain cars, some people opened their umbrellas and put up resistance. And based on the observation, they decided that those were the people that, or the scene that required intervention. And between the time our officers entered and left the train, some people put up resistance with umbrellas and hard objects. So you could see that the officers once left and then they re-entered the train to subdue attackers who were assaulting officers with their umbrellas. Pepper sprays and police batons were used, and subsequently the violence stopped. And this explained why we went to platform number 3 after we dealt with the situation at platform number 4. So it was, at that time, people were running around and moving. Can Mr. Chan take the second question, please? Like I said, on the night of the 31st, we received a fire report inside the MTR station, and as such, we sent firefighters. And they arrived at 11:01 p.m. Upon arrival, we confirmed that there was no fire in the MTR station, but we saw several injured persons at the platform area. Some firefighters had first responder qualifications. They assessed the injuries immediately and provided initial treatment. And at 11:17 p.m., the first fire engine arrived, and the first ambulance arrived. And with the assistance of MTR staff, they entered the site for assessment at 11:30. Other support vehicles arrived at the scene at 12:30 to attend to injured persons. You claim there were medical errors. I think such errors didn't exist. At that time, medics provided preliminary assessment and treatment at the scene. And among our officers, there were medical teams. We had basic medical knowledge. And in past operations, you could see that some of our officers provided treatment to injured persons on site. As to why Prince Edward Station was closed, that would affect the response time of medics, as you know. And outside Prince Edward Station, there were a large group of violent protesters who were yelling, and meanwhile, Prince Edward Police Station could not provide service due to the violence of the protesters. Intelligence showed that there were a lot of protesters outside the MTR station, unearthing bricks from the ground, and as such, the medics who arrived on site must work with the police and MTR staff in entering the platform area and conducting rescue work. The station was closed because some violent protesters were breaching peace, and as such, the station was closed, and the response time by the ambulatory staff was longer. And due to different factors, we decided not to discharge those injured persons via Prince Edward Station, but instead via Lai Chi Kok station. We conducted an assessment at that time, and that is there were a lot of violent protesters outside Prince Edward Station, including those unearthing bricks, and the reporting station of Prince Edward's police station was not in service. A lot of people were surrounding the MTR exit, and we had to analyze the risks faced by police officers at that time. And in the last 2 months, we saw cases in which medics were surrounded, and some people tried to rescue the arrested people, so to speak. And as such, we must conduct assessments before deciding how we bring the injured persons to hospital. And subsequently, the injured persons were taken to Lai Chi Kok Station and then on to hospitals for treatment. And the response time for first aid was longer than usual. And if you think about the reason, it was because of the people, the violent people who did not conform to the law, and as such, the injured persons could not be sent for treatment on a timely manner. And at the platform area, first aiders and police provided basic first aid services already. I do not agree with the claim that no relevant first aid services were provided as a result.
Mr. Lee, last week Mr. Tse said already that we would go through certain procedures to obtain the injury report of the injured person. Now, usually when we obtain the report of the injured person, usually we just need to seek the person's consent or an authorization letter, and then the hospital authority will assist us in providing the report. But we did not have the consent of this injured person, so we therefore had to apply for a court warrant in accordance with Section 57 of the Police Force Ordinance, and then we obtained a warrant from a magistrate. This is not something unusual. Usually when we have to go into someone's premises for search, then that's the kind of warrant we would obtain. So last week we already sent the warrant to the hospital authority. We are looking forward to the reply of the hospital authority, because after we learn about the injury, then that would help us immensely in finding out more about the case. Now, if I may add, last week the injured person made a video. I saw that person was in good, in good state, it seems. So can I make another appeal to her? Because our superintendent already wrote to her asking her to help us with our investigation. Hopefully she could tell us what exactly happened, where she was, what she was doing, what the other protesters were doing at the time. Hopefully then we could get to the truth of the case. So that's all I'd like to add. Thank you. Last two questions. Well, last question, can we give it to the Apple Daily? Because last night we were seriously obstructed. But no, we can't do that. We have to be fair to everybody. I'm from China Daily.
Secretary of Security John Lee this morning called the violence and vandalism over the weekend it's black terror. What's your response to Lee's remarks, and how will the police bring the chaos to an end, since it's been almost 90 days that the social unrest rocked the city? Are the Hong Kong police force still keeping some powder dry? And my second question is, there has been new cases of privacy data leakage concerning police officers and their families. Some even threatened that they would resort to further violence in the shape of moves such as school bullying when the semester begins. And as we noticed that Professor Xie is among the victims. Yeah. So what are some of the tactics to ensure the safety of police officers and their families under such circumstances and to keep things from spiraling out of control? Thank you.
Many thanks for the question. And I will answer your first question and the second one I will make a remark, and perhaps Mr. Lee will follow up on the second one. I guess in my opening remark, I have already mentioned that the escalation of violence over this period is really, really worrying. And in particular, last Saturday, the widespread and rampant use of petrol bombs certainly exceeds the law-abiding citizens of our home Hong Kong will tolerate. That said, as I mentioned in the closing remark in my Chinese version of the opening remark, the force, as law enforcement agencies, one of the leading ones in Hong Kong, will continue to join hands with other law enforcement agencies to try our very best to restore the public order and public safety of Hong Kong. That's what we aim at, and we have the confidence to do so. Regarding the second question, the outrageous advocation of using violence against children of police officers on various social media. I truly believe that most of the people of Hong Kong will not agree with such act. It's not only illegal, it's immoral. Our force will try to and continue to and every means to ensure the safety of the family of our force members. And perhaps Mr. Lee will supplement on the offenses of these kind of acts on the social media.
As far as the offense is concerned, I think the cyber world is not, most of the offense in the realities can be used. Say, for example, the criminal intimidations or any incitement offenses. So in our force, the cybercrimes unit is responsible for the investigation of this kind of cases. And since June, we have detected a number of cases and made a number of arrests. So, and also for the officers concerned, if they have come across this kind of incident, they can make a 24 hours hotline to us to make a report. The last remark I want to make is because my duty as a detective, I have many chance to deal with the officers and the children is facing this kind of problem. What I think is immoral, as my boss told everybody, and another thing that's, don't think that we police are afraid of this kind of things, because if afraid of this one, no one can protect the whole community. That we promise to do to our society. Thank you.
I would like to supplement on this question. I'm not going to answer the second one specifically. I think it takes two to tango. Both the police and public have an important role to play in maintaining Hong Kong's safety and order, and to prevent all this kind of bullying acts as well as criminal intimidation acts. Restoring public order depends a lot on the police work, but I think it also depends on the law obedience of the Hong Kong citizens. We must not tolerate any violent or lawless behavior. For those who break the laws, I think they have to stop. And for those who are simply bystanders, or they are just a general public, as well as reporters, I think we all should voice out against violence. Do not support, tolerate, or participate in any kind of tolerance. And please don't give excuse for them to use violence. And I think police will take every opportunity to appeal to every member of the public to respect the rule of law and help Hong Kong to revert to the right track. Thank you.
明報唔該。
我想問翻咧即係太子站嗰度咧。
Oh, Ming Pao. Now, for the Prince Edward MTR station, how can you be so sure that you have beaten up innocent people? How can you be so sure? You mentioned there were people injured, there were people arrested. You still have to do further investigation. How can you be so sure that you didn't hit innocent people by mistake? And if that's the case, is the mistake with the operation? And about sending the injured to the hospital, it took almost 2 hours. Now, it's also said that some of those sustained serious injuries. So how come you could say without professional knowledge that there has not been a medical error? And now, third question this morning, there are class boycotts at many schools. There were police officers in the vicinity, and they said that some police officers waited for people to come out of restaurants. So that's a kind of white terror. So what kind of operation is that? There's also word circulating online that some children the children of one police officer were escorted to school by police officer. Is that special treatment for police officers' children?
Thank you for the questions. I will defer to Mr. Chair for the first question. Well, Mr. Chair can answer the first two questions, and we'll see if Mr. Chen wants to ask anything, and Mr. Kong for the third question. For the first question, well, I have actually answered it twice already. When the police entered the MTR station, when they entered the platform area, they were to deal with those who conducted illegal acts. When they entered the platform, they entered the platform having received reports from the public, and they knew that there were acts of violence and vandalism at the platform. You can see from a lot of footage, a lot of people could leave the MTR station freely. We were not surrounding the station or stopping people from leaving. And after they arrived at the platform area, and we would consider different things. For example, the people reported by citizens, the actual situation, and the officers' own observation on how they would deal with the perpetrators, and they would deal with the situation accordingly. Like I said, and they did not deploy force at every single car. They only entered certain cars. And before and when they entered the cars, a lot of people put up illegal resistance. They assaulted police officers with umbrellas and other hard objects. I would not deny that some people might not be conducting any attacks on the trains, but what is sure is that some people did put up resistance against police action, and we, as a result, deployed force. We used police batons and pepper spray. When those people ceased their attacks, our use of force also stopped. Video footage show that people were on their knees, and they suffered pepper sprays on their body. Pepper sprays were used during confrontations. We can confirm that. As for the 2-hour period, so my question was, why could we only bring those injured persons to hospital after 2 hours? The main reason was that a lot of violent protesters surrounded Prince Edward Station. In deciding to bring the injured persons to another MTR station, it wasn't a typical decision. And like I explained, it was based on different reasons, including the fact that there were a lot of violent protesters outside the MTR station. And from our experience, and the relevant people, including first aiders, might be surrounded and attacked, like we saw from a lot of footage over the past months. And having discussed the matter with MTR staff, we decided to bring the injured ones to Lai Chi Kok Station and then to hospitals. It wasn't a typical decision, but it was the best course of action at that time. As for the medical arrangements, like Mr. Chan said, in the meantime, medical workers carried out assessment and attended to the injured persons. So medical attention was provided at the scene. And as for the culpability in the 2-hour delay, we should blame the violent people who were surrounding the MTR station and the Prince Edward or the Mong Kok police station. On that night, a longer time was needed to bring the injured persons to hospital. So it was not ideal from the rescue perspective. And like Mr. Chair said, with risk assessment conducted by the police, we had to consider the safety of our colleagues and the injured persons, and bringing them to Lai Chi Kok Station on the train was the best course of action available at that time. How could you conduct the assessment from Prince Edward to MTR station to the hospital? It would only take 10 minutes or so. Why? So what was your consideration at that time? We saw that in the past, protesters allowed the vehicles to go through. So on what grounds did you feel that the protesters would stand in the way? That night, we looked at the police's risk assessment on the ground. As for the last question, school starts today. And as with the past, the police would conduct patrols on areas with many schools. We received certain reports over a number of cases. Some people told our officers that there were people wearing black masks outside certain schools. And in response to these reports, we visited the entrances of schools. We would check whether any individuals were standing outside the schools to alleviate the doubts of parents and others alike. And that is, why would people who were not students, teachers, or parents be standing around? We are obliged to dispel the concerns of schools or parents. In recent public order events, we saw that the level of violence escalated. There were more and more acts of extreme vandalism, and people were yelling. We hope that these would not spread to schools or school areas. And as such, we acted to dispel public concern and to restore public order and safety. Were they ushering people to schools? This is the end of the press conference today.